Everyone thought Steven Martinez was just another expendable employee. For 15 years, I'd been the guy who showed up early, stayed late, and never complained when projects got dumped on my desk at the last minute. I was the reliable one, the fixer, the person management could count on when systems crashed at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. But they had no idea about the envelope sitting in my desk drawer. They had no idea what Steven Martinez really knew. And they definitely had no idea what was coming. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I hunched over my keyboard for the third consecutive night. My coffee long cold. The office empty, except for the distant sound of the cleaning crew's vacuum. The database migration project had to be perfect. 12 months of customer data, financial records, everything that kept our mid-sized tech company breathing. One mistake could cost us millions, maybe sink us entirely. My wife Sarah had stopped waiting up for me weeks ago. When I finally crawled into bed at 3 a.m., she'd stirred just enough to mumble, "You're killing yourself for people who don't even see you, Steven." I'd kiss her forehead and promise tomorrow would be different, knowing it was a lie we both wanted to believe. The migration was supposed to be routine. Transfer everything to the new cloud infrastructure, test the connections, verify data integrity. Simple, except our previous IT director had left the system held together with digital duct tape and prayers. Every line of code I touched revealed another shortcut, another potential disaster waiting to happen. That's when I found it. Hidden deep in the authentication protocols was a backdoor so obvious it might as well have had a neon sign. Anyone with basic hacking knowledge could walk right into our customer database, credit card information, trade secrets, everything. The scary part wasn't that it existed. It was that someone had clearly been using it. Recent access logs, data exports, files copied to external drives. My hands froze over the keyboard. This wasn't just sloppy programming. This was either criminal negligence or something much worse. I should have called David Thompson, my boss, immediately. Should have sent an emergency email to the security team. Instead, I did something that would change everything. I started documenting. Screenshots, server logs, access records, every piece of evidence that proved someone had been bleeding our company dry from the inside. By the time I finished, dawn was creeping through the office windows. I created multiple backups, stored them in places only I knew about, and for the first time in 15 years, I called in sick. The next few weeks passed in a strange haze. I fixed the security hole quietly, professionally, the way I'd always handled problems. But David's behavior started changing. The man who used to greet me with coffee and weekend football talk suddenly had no time for conversations. Meetings happened without me. Emails went unanswered. "You look like hell," Sarah said one morning, watching me stare at my reflection while shaving. Dark circles had taken permanent residence under my eyes, and I'd lost 15 pounds without trying. "Just work stress," I mumbled, but we both knew it was more than that. Something was building. Pressure accumulating like steam in a kettle. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Subject line: Team Restructuring Discussion. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. Corporate speak for someone's getting fired, and given the way David had been avoiding me, I had a pretty good idea who. I printed the email, added it to a growing folder of documentation, and for the first time since finding that back door, I smiled. They had no idea what they were walking into. The team lunch was David's idea of being classy about it. Corner booth at Romano's, The kind of place where middle management went to feel important. 12 of us crammed around a table meant for 8, the conversation forced and awkward. Everyone could sense something was wrong, but nobody wanted to be the first to acknowledge the elephant in the room. David waited until we'd ordered, until everyone was trapped with appetizers coming, and no graceful way to leave. Then he cleared his throat with the theatrical gravity of a man who thought he was delivering a Shakespearean soliloquy. "Stephen," he said, loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear, "we need to talk about your future with the company." The table went silent. Even the waitress stopped mid-step, sensing the sudden tension. I could feel 12 pairs of eyes on me, some sympathetic, others relieved it wasn't them in the hot seat. "You've been with us 15 years, David continued, his voice carrying that fake compassion managers practice in HR seminars. "And we appreciate your dedication, but the company is evolving, and we need people who can evolve with us." My colleague Jennifer actually winced. Tom studied his breadstick like it contained the secrets of the universe. The new hires looked confused, probably wondering if they were witnessing a normal Tuesday or a career-ending disaster. "You are not capable of going further," David said, each word delivered with surgical precision. "Your time here is over. You don't need to come back tomorrow." The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Someone's phone buzzed. A child laughed at another table. Life continued around us, while my 15-year career supposedly died in an Italian restaurant that smelled like garlic and broken dreams. Then I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not an angry smile, but something David couldn't quite read. Something that made him shift uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly unsure if he'd just won or walked into a trap. "Thank you for letting me know," I said, my voice steady. "I'll clean out my desk this afternoon." I stood up, left $20 for my untouched sandwich, and walked out of Romano's with my head high. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of whispered conversations, everyone trying to process what they'd just witnessed. The drive back to the office gave me 20 minutes to think. 20 minutes to decide whether to take the high road or the highway that led directly through David Thompson's professional grave. By the time I parked in the company lot for what would supposedly be the last time, my decision was made. My desk looked the same as it had that morning. Family photos, coffee-stained notepads, the small cactus Sarah had given me 5 years ago that somehow survived my black thumb. But everything felt different now. Every drawer I opened, every file I touched, carried weight it hadn't possessed 12 hours earlier. The envelope was exactly where I'd left it, hidden behind a stack of technical manuals nobody else bothered reading. Plain manila, unmarked, containing documents that would either save my career or destroy David's. Maybe both. I held it against my chest for a moment, feeling the weight of 15 years of loyalty, of late nights and missed family dinners, of believing that hard work and integrity meant something in corporate America. Then I slipped it into my jacket pocket and started boxing up my life. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "How did the lunch go? Call me when you can." I typed back, "I'll explain everything when I get home. But honey, remember what we discussed about Plan B?" Her response came immediately. "Oh my God, are you okay? Should I be worried?" "Don't worry," I wrote back, surprising myself with how calm I felt. "Everything's going to be fine. Better than fine, actually." As I carried the last box to my car, I passed David's office. Through the glass walls, I could see him on the phone, probably calling HR to process my termination paperwork. He looked pleased with himself, the way predators look after a successful hunt. He had no idea that Stephen Martinez wasn't just another middle-aged IT guy afraid of change. He had no idea that for the past 2 years, I'd been conducting the most thorough security audit in company history, and he definitely had no idea that the quiet, reliable employee he'd just humiliated in front of the entire team was about to become his worst nightmare. I started my car and pulled out of the parking lot, checking the rearview mirror one last time. In 6 hours, my former colleagues would start receiving emails they weren't expecting. In 12 hours, David would get a phone call that would change his life forever. In 24 hours, everyone would understand exactly what Stephen Martinez was capable of. The next month was going to be fun. Not fun in the way normal people use the word, but fun in the way justice feels when it's been 15 years in the making. Fun in the way truth feels when it finally gets to stretch its legs after being cramped in a manila envelope. Fun in the way watching a bully realize he picked on the wrong person. I drove home through suburban streets lined with oak trees and American dreams, thinking about the conversation I was about to have with my wife. Sarah knew about Plan B, had known about it for 2 years, but she'd never expected we'd actually need it. "Stephen," she'd said when I first told her, "this sounds dangerous. What if it backfires?" "Then we'll deal with it together," I'd promised. "But sweetheart, sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to save everything." Now, pulling into our driveway, seeing her silhouette in the kitchen window, I realized I was about to find out if I'd been right. The envelope crinkled in my jacket pocket as I walked toward the front door, containing documents that would reveal exactly who Stephen Martinez really was, what he'd been doing for the past 2 years, and why David Thompson had just made the biggest mistake of his professional life. Tomorrow morning, while David was drinking his coffee and congratulating himself on finally getting rid of dead weight, I'd be making phone calls that would turn his world upside down. By the end of the week, he'd understand that some employees aren't as expendable as they appear. The next month was going to be very fun indeed. The first domino fell at 8:47 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. I was sitting in my home office, still in my pajamas, watching the chaos unfold through carefully placed contacts throughout the company. My phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m. with texts from former colleagues, each one more frantic than the last. "Stephen, what the hell is happening here?" came the first message from Jennifer, my former cubicle neighbor. "David's been called into an emergency meeting with the entire board. Security guards are everywhere." I sip my coffee and type back calmly, "Just another Wednesday, I guess." But it wasn't just another Wednesday. It was the day a mid-sized tech company discovered that their recently fired IT specialist had been something else entirely, something their management structure wasn't equipped to handle. The second call came from Tom in accounting, his voice shaking. "Stephen, man, they're asking about you, about your access levels, about what projects you worked on. There are people here I've never seen before, carrying briefcases and looking like they mean business. External auditors, right on schedule." "I'm sure it's just routine," I told him, knowing it was anything but routine. Nothing about the next few weeks would be routine for anyone at Matthews Technologies. By 10 a.m., the calls started coming directly to me. First from HR, then from David himself, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Stephen, we need to talk. There's been some kind of misunderstanding. Can you come in today? I'm sorry, David, I said, enjoying the irony. Yesterday, you made it very clear that my time there was over. I'm just following your instructions. This is serious, Stephen. There are federal investigators here. They're asking about security protocols, about data breaches, about... I hung up. The third call came an hour later from someone whose voice I didn't recognize. Mr. Martinez? This is Patricia Williams from the Securities and Exchange Commission. We need to schedule a meeting with you regarding your employment at Matthews Technologies. Of course, I said. I've been expecting your call. The silence on the other end stretched just long enough to let me know I'd said something significant, something that changed how they were going to approach this conversation. Mr. Martinez, are you represented by counsel? I don't think I'll need counsel, Ms. Williams. I have extensive documentation of everything you're going to want to know. By noon, the story was spreading through Matthews Technologies like wildfire. Not the real story. That would take days to fully emerge. But the chaotic, frightening version that employees tell each other when their world suddenly stops making sense. My phone rang again. This time, it was Rebecca from marketing, and she was crying. Stephen, they're interviewing everyone. They want to know about our client data, about who had access to what. People are saying there's been some kind of massive security breach, that the company might go under. I have 2 kids, Stephen. I can't lose this job. Rebecca, I said gently, I want you to listen to me carefully. You're going to be fine. The people who did nothing wrong have nothing to worry about. Just tell the truth about everything you know, and you'll be fine. But what about David? They took him out of here in handcuffs 20 minutes ago. I set down my coffee cup, harder than intended. Handcuffs weren't part of my plan. What exactly did you see, Rebecca? 2 FBI agents escorted him out. His face was white as a sheet. Stephen, what's really going on here? I was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. The Bureau moving this fast meant they'd found something worse than I documented, something that elevated this from corporate malfeasance to federal crime. I can't discuss the details, Rebecca, but I promise you, justice is being served. That afternoon, I drove to Matthews Technologies for the first time since cleaning out my desk. The parking lot looked like a law enforcement convention. Unmarked sedans, government plates, serious-looking people in suits carrying file boxes out of the building. I'd been summoned for a 3 p.m. meeting with the investigative team. Part of me was nervous, but mostly I felt vindicated. 15 years of watching corners get cut, protocols ignored, and ethical standards bent until they snapped had led to this moment. The conference room was packed with people I'd never seen before. FBI, SEC, representatives from the State Attorney General's office, and sitting at the head of the table, looking 20 years older than he had a week ago, was CEO Robert Matthews himself. Mr. Martinez, said Agent Sarah Chen, who'd introduced herself as the lead investigator. Thank you for coming in. We understand you were recently terminated from your position here. Yesterday, actually, during a team lunch in front of 12 witnesses. Robert Matthews winced visibly. The man who'd built this company from nothing was watching it crumble in real time, and we both knew his termination of me had accelerated the timeline. We'd like to discuss your role here, Agent Chen continued. Specifically, your access to company systems and your knowledge of data security protocols. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. I think this will answer most of your questions. For the next 3 hours, I walked them through everything. The security vulnerabilities I'd discovered, the unauthorized data access I'd documented, the evidence of systematic privacy violations that had been happening for months before anyone in management bothered to notice. But the real bombshell came when Agent Chen asked about my background. "Mr. Martinez, we've been reviewing your employment file, and there are some discrepancies. Your resume shows 15 years of IT work, but your college transcripts show a degree in cybersecurity with a specialization in corporate fraud investigation." Robert Matthews' head snapped up. "What?" I'd been waiting 2 years for this moment. "Mr. Matthews, I need to tell you something that's going to come as a shock. For the past 2 years, I haven't just been your IT specialist. I've been conducting a comprehensive security audit on behalf of your board of directors." The room went completely silent. Even the FBI agents looked surprised. "That's impossible," Robert stammered. "I would have known about any board-authorized investigation." "Not if the board suspected the problems went all the way to executive management," I said quietly. "Sir, your directors hired me through a consulting firm specifically because they were concerned about data irregularities and wanted an inside assessment." I pulled out the second envelope, the one I'd carried for 2 years, waiting for the right moment. "This is my original contract, signed by Board Chairman William Harrison. I was hired to identify security vulnerabilities, document potential fraud, and report directly to the board if I found evidence of criminal activity." Robert Matthews looked like he'd been hit with a sledgehammer. "You've been spying on us for 2 years?" "I've been protecting your company for 2 years," I corrected. "And yesterday, when David Thompson fired me for not being capable of going further, he terminated the one person who might have been able to contain this quietly." Agent Chen leaned forward. "Mr. Martinez, are you saying you could have resolved these issues internally?" "I was trying to. My report wasn't due to the board for another 6 months. I was hoping to work with management to fix the problems before they became criminal matters. But when David fired me yesterday, I had no choice but to activate the emergency protocols outlined in my contract." I turned to Robert Matthews, who looked like he was aging in real time. "Sir, within 4 hours of my termination, I sent complete documentation to the board, the SEC, and the FBI. Not because I wanted to destroy the company, but because my contract required it if my investigation was compromised." The implications were sinking in around the room. David Thompson hadn't just fired an employee. He'd triggered a legal avalanche that was about to bury everything he'd worked for. "Where is David now?" Robert asked quietly. Agent Chen answered, "Mr. Thompson is in federal custody. We found evidence that he was aware of the security breaches and may have been profiting from the data theft. The charges include conspiracy, wire fraud, and violations of federal privacy laws." I felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction that justice was being served, but also sadness for the man who'd thrown away his career for reasons I still didn't fully understand. "Mr. Martinez," Robert said, his voice barely above a whisper, "David Thompson has been with this company for 8 years. He has a wife, 2 kids in college. Did you know this would happen to him?" "Sir, I documented what I found. Mr. Thompson made his own choices about how to handle that information. If he's in custody, it's because the evidence shows he committed crimes, not because I reported them." The meeting continued for another hour, but the real drama was over. The next few weeks would be about paperwork, legal procedures, and damage control. Matthews Technologies would survive, but it would be a very different company. As I drove home that evening, my phone rang one more time. It was William Harrison, chairman of the board, the man who'd hired me 2 years ago for a job I'd never been sure I'd have to complete. "Stephen, I heard about today's developments. How are you holding up?" "I'm okay, Mr. Harrison. It's been intense, but I think we've accomplished what you hired me to do." "Actually, Stephen, that's why I'm calling. The board met this afternoon, and we'd like to discuss a permanent position with the company, Chief Security Officer, with full authority to implement the changes you've recommended." I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, processing the offer. 2 days ago, I'd been a fired IT guy with an uncertain future. Now I was being offered the chance to rebuild a company from the ground up. "Can I think about it, Mr. Harrison?" "Of course. Take all the time you need. But Stephen, I want you to know something. What you did took incredible courage. A lot of people in your position would have just taken the severance package and walked away." "That's not who I am, sir." "No," he said, "it's not. And that's exactly why we need you." That night, over dinner with Sarah, I finally told her the whole story. About the contract I'd signed 2 years ago. About the investigation I'd been conducting. About the choice David Thompson had forced me to make. "So you were never really just an IT guy?" she asked. "I was an IT guy. But I was also something else. Something the company needed, but didn't know they needed." She was quiet for a long time, processing everything. "Are you going to take the CSO position?" "I think so. The company's going to need someone who understands both the technical side and the human side of what went wrong. And David Thompson, what happens to him?" I thought about the man who'd humiliated me in front of our colleagues, who'd thrown away his career for money he didn't even need, who was now facing years in federal prison. David made choices, Sarah. Every day for months, he chose to look the other way, while criminals stole from our clients. He chose to cover up security breaches instead of fixing them. And yesterday, he chose to fire the one person who could have helped him make things right. I reached across the table and took her hand. Sometimes justice looks like revenge, but it's not the same thing. Revenge is about hurting people who hurt you. Justice is about making sure the right thing happens, even when it's hard. 3 weeks later, I walked back into Matthews Technologies as their new chief security officer. The company was smaller now. Several executives had been terminated, some departments had been restructured, and the entire corporate culture was being rebuilt from scratch. David Thompson pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. I sent a card to his wife, expressing condolences and offering to write a character reference if it would help. She never responded, but I understood why. My first day back, I found a note on my desk from Jennifer. "Welcome back, Stephen. We're lucky to have you." But the note that meant the most came from Rebecca in marketing. "Thank you for telling me everything would be okay. You were right. My job is safe, the company is stronger, and I sleep better at night knowing people like you are watching out for us." I kept that note in my desk drawer, right next to the empty manila envelope that had started everything. A reminder that sometimes the most important battles are fought quietly by ordinary people who refuse to accept that corruption and incompetence are just part of doing business. The next month had been fun. just like I'd promised myself. Not because I'd destroyed David Thompson's life, but because I'd helped build something better from the wreckage of what came before. Justice served, accountability restored, and a company saved by the expendable employee who turned out to be anything but expendable. Sometimes the person you underestimate isn't just holding all the cards. Sometimes they're holding the future of everything you've built and the wisdom to know what to do with it.